really interesting thing about that is mushrooms, when exposed to the sunlight, produce a ton of vitamin D, and it can even happen after the mushrooms have been harvested. It blew me away, but it can even happen even after the mushrooms have been dehydrated. They exposed dehydrated lion's mane to UV light like the sun, but it was kind of more intense. And they had more vitamin D after that, even though they had been dehydrated. I don't even understand how that works, um, but it's also so it's like as you're drying them in the sun, these mushrooms are producing this very important thing that we need, right? Like it's an important thing, especially for people like me here in Ohio, who where it's very cloudy all the time, right? Like we don't get the sun as much to produce our own vitamin D, and so that's one way you could do it, just in the sun. Of course, if it's very cold out or if it's raining or humid, that's not going to work. Um, Depending on the mushroom, they can be sliced really thin and actually either wrapped in paper or put in like a paper bag, and the paper will absorb some of the moisture. I've done it. I've just hung them on strings in my house. Just a needle and a string through the mushrooms, like just sort of a garland or whatever. And I will just hang those in the. Yes, I'm sure in the Pacific Northwest, you definitely need some vitamin D. Same here in the Midwest. Ohio is dark and cloudy. But yeah, there are. You could also do it near an oven, right? Like you don't want to probably cook the mushrooms too much, but if you have an oven that's cooling down, you can put them on a tray in there. Put them next to a fire, right? In on the stones around a fire. I did that when camping. Where it's like we didn't have the dehydrator, you put them on the stones that are around the outside of the fire to kind of dry them. I mean, basically anything that has heat, any kind of
Mhm.
heat can usually dehydrate things, or moving air. I know people who will set like a fan up right in front of the mushrooms somehow with some kind of contraption. I've seen it online where they do it from the bottom, right? They lay the fan so it's blowing up. They put the mushrooms and they put a screen over it so the mushrooms don't go flying in the air, and then that moving air dehydrates the mushrooms too. So you don't need fancy equipment. I certainly didn't have fancy equipment, back in the day. Sometimes I would just put them on racks in my house, especially if it was kind of drier in the winter, or like in the fall where it can be kind of dry and cold. But the main thing is just to get them as dry as possible, and then to try to keep them dry, right? To put
Mm.
them in something that's airtight, whether that's like a jar or just something to try to keep the moisture out. Moisture, sunlight, and heat are the things that are going to kind of compromise things like mushrooms and other foods over time. So, trying to keep them away from all those things. Maybe not sunlight because of the mushroom vitamin D thing, um, but those can kind of sort of damage things as they're in storage. So I like to keep things in cool, dark places if possible.
Okay. No, that's good to know here, especially with the less sun. I know Uganda doesn't have that problem, but being able to
Right.
dehydrate in the sun, especially like in these locations where, hey, in the summertime we have markets and people selling mushrooms and all of this is really plentiful. And then in the wintertime, all that stuff ends. And
Right.
so being able to dehydrate mushrooms and keep them, store them in a jar and store them in a cool place
Hmm.
that's dark and be able to use them throughout the winter, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any other questions. I wanted to ask about foraging a little bit,
Hmm.
because you do a lot on that and you teach classes. And so this is a subject that just terrifies me, right? Because I'm always afraid, hey, let's go look for mushrooms. I think Kristen is online and she will attest that like we find mushrooms and send pictures to her and go, what is this? Um, so I guess when starting to forage, because I know there's stuff here, I know Josephine wants to start looking at doing some foraging in Uganda, is just getting started. What to look for, what to do, if you're brand new to it, what tools, tips you might have, and because I wouldn't even know how to know if a mushroom is old and good to eat even or not, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difficult thing. And I kind of just had to jump in. I did not have anybody to learn from. Nobody in my family was foraging. My family, we did some hunting and fishing, and we would eat wild raspberries and things that we knew for sure were edible because we knew exactly what they were. So I was very nervous at first. I basically had one book, and it was the Audubon Field Guide to North American Mushrooms. It was probably one of the only, or the most popular book back from the 1980s forward, and I just read that backwards and forwards. I looked at all the pictures. I was reading all of the all of the descriptions. Later to find out that because it was all of North America, half of those mushrooms will never be found in Ohio. So I kind of learned a little bit too much. But really, finding a good, if there is a local guide, a guidebook, or a website, right? There are lots of websites now. There are people making YouTube videos that are going to show you TikTok and Instagram, and they're going to teach you there. I would say though, if you have access to a real live person, somebody that has done it before, somebody that is reputable and kind of has been doing it for a while, learning in person is better than anything, right? Having somebody say, "Oh, look, let's check this mushroom out. Can we try to figure out what this is?" And a lot of people, of course, they're starting off, they're not going to know a whole lot. But by the end of a couple of hour hike or something, people are starting to really, it's starting to click when they start to see these mushrooms. And so, yeah, trying to find resources. Again, I think like with growing, growing, cultivating mushrooms is amazing, but finding them in the wild is just something different. It's like a yeah, it's like a scavenger hunt that you get to eat. Um, as far as like, how do you know which mushrooms are like, you can usually tell if a mushroom is kind of getting old.
Mm-hmm.
If it's starting to get dried out, if it's kind of if it Oh, and one thing that mushrooms often do as they age is the caps start to upturn, and they start to
Ah,
expose their gills or their pores. Oysters will do this, right? If you grow oysters and you let them grow too long, they'll often just kind of flip upside down because they want all of their spores to get out into the wind so that they can reproduce. So when you see mushrooms that are kind of where you're seeing a lot of the gills or a lot of the underside kind of flipping upside down, that's a good indication that it's getting old. It's
mm,
kind of at the mature stage. Um, at which point, when you cut into it, you're probably going to see a lot of bugs. That's a good way also to know, right? So wild mushroom, bugs love mushrooms just like we do, people. Yeah, they love mushrooms. The slugs and the insects and the little things. But we try to get to them before they do. And so, but if you cut through a mushroom or cut through the stem and you see a bunch of holes, you're not the first one to eat that mushroom. So that's another good indicator. And smell. I mean, I smell every single mushroom I pick, even if it's something I've picked a million times. I just smell it. Like, what does it smell like? Does it smell good? Not all mushrooms that smell good are edible, but if that's a this if it's like, okay, I know what this mushroom is. Now, does it smell good or does it smell off? Is there
yeah.
something funky about it? That could be something. They can grow bacteria. Um, some mushrooms, like oyster mushrooms, when they get kind of too old, they kind of smell like bad seafood.
Ew.
It's kind of like when like, oh, I think I need to, when you smell something like that, you're like, I think I need to clean that thing, right? That's the kind of just kind of looking for something that's fragrant. They're generally nice and firm, and not all mushrooms. Some can be kind of floppy, but if they're squishy and mushy and weird, that's usually not going to be something that you're going to want to eat either.
Yeah. And if you have time, just one last question. I was just looking at the epiphany mushrooms, and of course, authenticity and quality is a big focus I saw with
Mm-hmm.
that. And so there's a lot of mushroom products out now, especially in the US and I think
Oh
growing
yeah.
in other countries. And so there's tinctures here and mixtures here. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what do you look for to make sure something's high quality? Like, that's always my question is, when I go look at a tincture, when I go look at stuff, it's like, how do I know this is a good high quality mushroom product?
Right. That is the big question, and there are several things to look for. When I'm looking for a product like that, I would rather get the mushrooms as local as possible, right? So like if can find something that is made near me, or at least made in the United States, or at least with mushrooms that were grown near me or in the United States, I'm going to feel a little more comfortable about it because I just kind of have this idea that they're going to be more fresh. They were like we're kind of keeping things local, keeping the economy local. That's one thing, but also like uh, how are they what's the maybe what's the process, with tinctures. The dual extraction method is probably one of the most popular, and again, that's where you're doing it in alcohol and water. So I would look for that. Most of the products out there are using that, so that's kind of pretty standard. There aren't very many that I've seen that aren't doing that. Some are doing a triple extraction, which I haven't even wrapped my head around. They're using a third solvent, and I can't remember exactly what that is, if it's like glycerin or something, to get even more out of the mushrooms. Um, if a company, if a company is testing their stuff, if they have any kind of literature out there, that's something we've been really big on. We've been sending. We have a relationship with. It's called Altitude Consulting. They're a testing facility out in Colorado, so we send our stuff. We just got some results back from our tinctures because we weren't happy with the results of our tinctures. We were testing for the compounds that are supposed to be in lion's mane, and finding them at either like non-detectable levels, which just means they're probably in there, but they weren't enough for the machine to detect, or they just weren't very much. And so we changed our process. We like really kind of we added more mushrooms. We changed the process in the meantime. Oh, we started using freeze dried mushrooms instead of dehydrated, which preserves some of those compounds too. And then all of a sudden, all of those testing percentages spiked, and we're like, okay, it has everything that we want it to have, and now we've kind of got to that, to that point. And we're also doing testing for like pesticides and heavy metals and residual solvents and things. We just want to make sure, before we put anything on the market, that we've gone through that process. So yeah, if they can, a lot of companies do that. They'll provide like a PDF that'll be like, hey, we had our here's the results of the contamination, or the
Mhm.
pesticides or the heavy metals tests. I see that sometimes on websites. I would say like also just word of like who if somebody recommends a product to you, it's probably that might be something to think about because obviously they like it if they're seeing some kind of benefit. Um, but also like don't be afraid to like try something, and if it's like, okay, I'm not sure that this is working, or I don't know if I'm getting what I should out of it. Try something different. Make them yourselves. Making your own tinctures is very easy. It just takes 6 weeks, that's all. It's
I
not.
know it took a little time, but hey, I'm good at
Yeah,
like starting and leaving something. I'm good at that.
exactly. Yeah, it's something you don't even have to worry about. You just, well, I guess you have to shake it once a day for the first, couple weeks or something. But it's really easy, and you can make a really high quality product with some cheap alcohol, some cheap vodka, and some dried mushrooms, and that's all in a jar, right? And a little bit of time, and be following some instructions for the next step after that. But you can make a lot of medicine, and save a lot of money as well, as long as you have access to the dehydrated mushrooms, which is, that's something that you have to find on your own, or obviously tons of places are selling dehydrated mushrooms online. So yeah, when in doubt, make it yourself. It's gonna be way less expensive. It's fun.
Yeah.
And again, if as long as you thought about it 6 weeks ago, you're great.
Yeah. All
You're
right.
golden.
I'm motivated now. I'm motivated because you have simplified dehydration and talking about tinctures and I'm learning about growing. So I'm getting motivated now. I can do a little bit at home. Well, I think we are at the end of time. So I just wanted to thank you, Dawn, so much. Unless there's any last minute questions, I'll give it 30 seconds in case there's a question.
Hello, Dawn.
And thanks for having
me.
me.
Oh, I see Josephine online there. Yes,
Hi, Josephine.
Hi, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Warm greetings to everyone at the Epiphany Company. We are so
Thank you. And
we are so grateful.
Good morning to you in Uganda.
Good evening to you in Ohio. How is Sarah? Warm greetings to her.
Oh my goodness, Sarah's great. So Josephine and Robert stayed with us last year when they came out to the Ohio Mushroom Festival. So we had a great week hanging out with them. Miss you guys a lot. Sarah misses you. We have to figure out how to get to Uganda one of these days and visit you and go look for mushrooms in your part of the world.
Yes, we are looking forward to having you. We can't believe we had everyone. Ted is here, Dennis is here, Aixa, Max. We have a lovely baby. Thank you so much, Sarah, for putting this together. We are so grateful. And then I wanted to let you know that at Eco-Agric Uganda, we have a solar dryer that we have been using. Actually, one has been here for years and it got old for this festival. We constructed a new one. And then we had someone, a speaker. It is not a speaker, an exhibitor who brought in a dehydrator.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So
well, a solar dehydrator? That's new to me.
No, it is not solar.
Now I have to look that up.
It is not solar. It is electrical.
Okay. It's electrical. Oh, wait. Okay, so you have an electrical dehydrator as well.
No, it was an exhibitor.
Oh, an exhibitor had it. Okay.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. We are so grateful. Please reserve this slot for next festival. We would like to have you. And most especially the cooking. Oh my goodness. We tested it.
We'll do more cooking for sure.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dawn. We'll let you go. We know it's late. And
greetings, Robert.
Dawn, good to see you again, and thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome. It's great to see you as well. Good night, everyone.
Welcome.
Good night.
Welcome.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We will switch it over now. I see they got the video and things are up and running at Eco-Agric. So let's turn that over. Our next speaker, Ted Anderson, is going to be presenting. And Ted is also one of the co-founders, along with myself and Kristen, for African Rising Initiative. So we're so grateful that he was able to travel all the way out there to be part of this festival. So he is coming live from the festival with his presentation and information. So I will let you come on screen over there in the room. There we go. There we go.
Hello,
we see you.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah.
Wait, I think now it's stepped away a little bit.
We're going to do a little screen recording here, so the audio or screen share of my presentation, so that my voice can be nice and clear for the audio, so I can stay nice and close to the laptop.
Okay, perfect.
But but we'll have it nice and projected here in person, so we'll be good to go.
Okay. And do you want me to project anything on this side, 10?
No, I think Max has got it covered. I've got it. Do a screen share.
Yes. I'm waiting.
Come and work.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. We can see the screen. That's great.
Beautiful. All right,
And we
so
can
I'm no
see it.
longer on camera. Good. You don't want to be on camera at all? Nah, it should be fine, because I'm just presenting here for these folks, and then I want the audio to be clear on the
Okay.
presentation.
Here, let me get that back up then.
Thank you, Max. Or F5 or whatever it may be.
There. Perfect.
So,
Looks good and sounds good.
awesome. Well,
All right.
thank you everybody for attending the virtual and the in-person trainings. I'm going to go ahead and do a little presentation on kind of what I've been doing in person here at the festival, which is teaching the techniques that Josephine uses here at Eco-Agric Uganda to grow mushrooms. So we'll get an idea of basically all the stages of mushroom growth and how we realistically do it here in Uganda. So first we start with cloning a mushroom or obtaining a mushroom culture of some kind. So here we've got a lot of oyster mushrooms growing. We can start a culture directly from a fruit, or we can collect the spores of that mushroom by simply placing the mushroom on a flat surface, a piece of paper, a piece of cardboard, a piece of aluminum foil. Because if you look at these gills here, under those gills, spores, the seeds of the mushroom, are constantly falling, okay? And so they're so small we cannot see them, but when we place it on a flat surface and maybe we put a cup over it, the spores will drop from the bottom of the mushroom and they will accumulate on that surface so that it becomes a white powder that we can see. That white powder is millions of spores that we will use to start a mushroom culture. So first we have to find the mushrooms, whether that's in the wild or somebody mails it to you or you get it at a market, okay? And so Josephine has given me mushrooms in person. I have cloned. She has sent me mail before. You can put spore prints on a letter and mail that letter and then start the culture from that spore print, okay? So it really is as simple as taking a mushroom and placing it on a flat surface where that white powder, the white spores will accumulate. So big shout out to Josephine for all of the gifts that she has sent me. Here we've got some mail from Uganda that was sent to me. I've got so many thank you letters from the children. Thank you so much. And just, you know, beautiful artwork that I hang on my flow hood, which is my air filter that I use to do mycology, to make sure that everything's nice and clean. So any part of a mushroom can be used to grow more mushrooms, okay? So this is what differentiates them from plants. And it's also what allows us, what empowers us to grow mushrooms. But we just need to know how we can start it correctly. So we place it on a flat surface, we gather spores, or we tear off a piece of the mushroom directly and we just place it on a food source of some kind. Some people can take mushrooms and put it on wet cardboard. That cardboard will start to turn white with mycelium.
What is we're doing what? Is it come on
Sorry, can you mute? I thought you were asking me a question. So any part of a mushroom can be used to grow more mushrooms. So here what we're doing is I'm finding a mushroom in nature and I'm cloning that mushroom, okay? So we'll go ahead and get into a little bit more detail what these little cups right here are. These are Petri dishes, reusable Petri dishes that we use here at Eco-Agric. So reusable meaning that I can cook them in boiling water multiple times over without it melting. And that's because of the type of plastic that it is. So first we make a sugar jelly substance called agar, okay? Now, all this is a powder that you mix in boiling water, and it is liquid when it is hot, and when you pour it into cups, it becomes a solid, okay? So think of it like gelatin, or if you think of animal fat, when you're cooking animal fat, it is very liquid when it's hot, but then as it cools in the pan, it becomes a solid. It's similar to that, but this is a seaweed extract called agar-agar, okay? So we use that to create a solid plane for the mushroom to grow on, and we add a little bit of sugar. That can be a boiled potato. That can be a boiled sweet potato. It can be syrup. It can be honey. It can be sorghum syrup, molasses, but some kind of sugar for the mushroom to grow on. Maybe we even take half coconut water and half regular water, and we mix it directly with our agar powder. So the process is we take our powder, we mix it in our bottle at a very specific ratio of water, and then we pressure cook that mixture so that it becomes sterile and very hot. So you can see I'm adding the agar to the bottle, okay? This is the agar-agar telephone brand. You get this in Asian markets in Europe and America, but it can be purchased online, and eventually Eco-Agric is going to be a hub for all of these kinds of materials. But basically, you get a small little packet of this, you add it to your bottle, and you add water. So when you heat it up, it's liquid. When you pour it into your cups, it's liquid. And then when it cools down, it becomes a solid pup of sugar jelly, okay? So these are some different food sources we can use to feed the mushrooms. When I say sugar, I don't just mean white sugar. I mean the starches that we find in potatoes, maybe corn syrup, coconut water. So those are all different sugars that we can use to feed mushrooms. And then there's also additional nutrients that we can add to feed mushrooms, such as chia seeds, yeast, or soy peptone. And those act as a supplemental food source, but those are not needed, okay? So basically a process for creating this sugar jelly is you add your agar to the bottle, you add half coconut water, or half potato water that you've strained from boiling a potato with regular water, and then you pressure cook it, okay? So if you can't find corn syrup, you can always boil millet and then strain that water off and use that as your food source for the mushroom. Or maybe it's sorghum, or maybe it's rye or rice, okay? So whatever it may be, we mix it in our bottle at a specific ratio. Generally, it's 20 grams per liter, okay? So whether it's agar-agar or it's malt powder that we're adding to make the Petri dishes, 20 grams per liter. Just keep it nice and simple. Now, if you do not have an ability to measure your agar with a digital scale, you need to figure out how much volume do I add? How many teaspoons is 20 grams of agar, okay? And that can be looked up on the internet. So then maybe you find out it's 3 teaspoons. So then I take my 2 or 3 teaspoons and I add it to my bottle, depending on how much water is needed. With these beer bottles, it's 1/4 of a liter. So everything needs to be adjusted for the recipe. So I say 20 grams per liter, but this bottle only holds 0.25 liters. So then I take 20 and I divide it by 4. So I get 5. So now we cook it in our pressure cooker, okay? We do that to ensure sterility, and water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, right? Under pressure, it boils at 120 degrees Celsius. And that is important for making sure that it is really clean, okay? So there are other ways that you can cook agar. I don't know if you can do it very well over the fire. You may have to cook it longer, but that's something that we'll have to experiment with. But a pressure cooker is kind of the beginning stages you need for agar, but it's not always required for mushroom growing. Eventually, Eco-Agric is going to be the hub of mushroom spawn production, you can come and source your spawn here, and then you break up all of the spawn or seeds of the mushroom and you spread it to your gardens yourself. That way you don't have to make the petri dishes yourself, because we'll be doing that here on site. So we cook it under pressure, meaning it reaches 15 pounds per square inch for at least 45 minutes. So first we get it to pressure, then we start our timer. Okay? We don't start the timer right when we turn the heat on. We wait till we get to pressure, then we start the timer. So 45 minutes, it should be enough. But if you find that your petri dishes are contaminated, start increasing the cook time to an hour and a half, to 2 hours if you need. The more nutrition that you add, the more that you need to cook it, okay? So we're cooking all the bottles that we put in the pressure cooker, and we need to wait for that pressure to cool down so that we can pop the lid off of the pressure cooker. So here I have a pressure cooker from the 1940s that my friend David Summerlin let me borrow. Huge blessing. I love that pressure cooker. But basically you screw down the pressure cooker sides, clasping metal on metal, and all of the pressure is retained inside of there. So now we have to pour the petri dishes when they're hot. Okay, this allows us to get it into the cups so that we can use our starting material. So what I'm using here is an air filter that ensures that no dust can land in the cup. If I see a ray of sunshine coming through the window, I see dust floating in the air at any point. I want to ensure that none of that lands in my petri dish. So I use an air filter so that if a piece of dust comes, the air is blowing and it blows away from the cups, okay? So this is called a HEPA filter, a high efficiency particulate air filter. I think that's what it stands for. And so basically, as things are floating in the air, as it gets pulled into the back of the filter, this white material is a bunch of fabric that's laid on top of each other over and over and over and over again, so that a single piece of dust cannot come through it at all. But air can still travel through it. So basically it's just a box with a blower on it, okay? So there's a big fan that's forcing air through a box, and there's one opening on that side of the box. The opening has a filter on it. Okay, that's the air filter that we're talking about here. So as air passes through the flow hood, you see all those layers of fabric. As it's passing through, it stops whatever dust or viruses or green mold contamination that would go through, that normally is existing in the air right now, okay? So on the right is an image of a petri dish that has contamination. So in the center is oyster mycelium, and then all around it is the contamination that we're trying to prevent, okay? And so if I open up a petri dish and I place oyster on the petri dish, it will start to grow. But if I do it in the open air like this, you'll also see contaminants start to grow on that sugar jelly, okay? So that's why it's important we get it really hot and we pour it in a really clean, inside of a room, so still that you're not disturbing the air and it won't land on your petri dishes. So you pour it. So here are the reusable cups that we use here at Eco-Agric, so we can pressure cook them over and over again. On the right are regular scientific petri dishes that are usually used in mushroom growing. The thing about these is it's just a piece of plastic sitting on another piece of plastic, and we have to wrap it every single time in grafting tape or parafilm for us to make sure that it's clean. But the cups on the left, they just need to be screwed shut and they don't need to be wrapped every time. So that helps reduce waste, and it helps to save on materials that cost money. So basically I have all of these cups that I pressure cooked just for a few minutes to keep them clean. And then I have my bottle of hot liquid that I'm gonna pour into the cups, okay? And I'm doing all in front of the air filter. So when the air filter is not on, there's no air movement, right? But when it is on, you can see the flame being pushed by the air. So there's always a continuous stream of air coming out of that air filter toward you. That's the idea behind it. Because any of the air that's blowing at you has no dust in it whatsoever. So you're either using a filter like this, or you're doing it inside of a small box that you sprayed with alcohol, and you're doing it very slowly so that no dust lands inside of the cups. So as you can see, when the air is blowing, it moves a lighter, and it bends a lighter down, or it bends a candle flame down at an angle. If you move it further away from the air source, it just becomes a regular flame again. And so that is your visual to know this is my clean air. And then as I move the flame away, this is where it can be contaminated. So you want to move as close to the filter as you possibly can. Here on the left are just an example of a bunch of different types of mushroom, mycelium, the roots of the mushroom. And different mushrooms can have different mycelium colors, okay? It doesn't always mean that it's contamination. So here I am, I have a beer bottle or I have a jar, whatever I may use to pour my hot agar into my cups in front of the air filter. So it has to be hot enough so that it can be liquid, and it needs to be mixed at the correct ratio so that it becomes a solid when it cools down. So our final result is this jelly cup. Now the color that's here is food coloring, okay? It's not contamination. You can add food dyes to your agar. It's fun for the kids, but also the mushrooms eat the food dye over time as a food source, and the color of the petri dish will start to get duller and duller as the mushroom eats that food dye. So it gives you an idea of how much nutrition is left in the cup. Not necessary at all. So we have our mycelium. We use petri dishes to take mycelium from other petri dishes. Or, like I said earlier, you can just tear off a piece of a mushroom and place it directly on that cup. And if I take a piece of a mushroom and I place it right there, it will start to grow mycelium from the very fruit itself, okay? Any part of a mushroom can be used to grow more mushrooms. So we start with our mycelium. That's the beginning stages. There's 3 main stages in mushroom growing. The mycelium, then we add that to bottles of grain, and then we break up that grain, and then we add it to our final garment, okay? So we have our mycelium, and all we need is a very small piece to add to another cup, and it will start to radiate outwards from where you placed it, okay? So here I have a bunch of mycelium gridded out so that I can make up to 10 cups, 12 cups from that 1 cup. Now I can make up to 50 more petri dishes or cups from a single cup, okay? That is the power of the mycelium. It will spread out from itself, and any part of a mushroom can be used to grow more mushrooms. So we can make 100 cups from a single one, as long as the genetics are nice and strong. So every part of mushroom growing, we like things to be clean. So as taking the cut and I'm moving it, I want my tool to be perfectly clean. The best way to ensure that is to get it so hot that it becomes red, okay? So if I heat something red hot right now and I'm holding it in this room, even if dust lands on it, it's still clean. But the moment it's not red anymore, I can't visually tell if a piece of dust lands on it, if it's clean or not. So that's why we like to get our instruments red hot. So that can be done using this induction sterilizer, which is just an electronic machine that you hold your metal tool in front of a coil, and it heats it red hot. Or you can simply use a lighter or a flame of some kind. A lot of people like to use an alcohol lamp. So you get a jar, you fill it with alcohol that's flammable, and then you put a piece of cotton in the top, and it wicks the alcohol up. You light it on fire, and you have a continuous source of flame. So this is kind of what the inside of the induction sterilizer looks like. It's just a coil that heats up iron-containing instruments, okay? So electricity through the coil heats our instruments red hot. And so we let it cool for just a few seconds before we do our transfers, okay? It's okay to cool it on the mycelium, but it can harm that little bit of mycelium that you burn. As soon as you take something red hot and put it on a petri dish, it'll go tss, and then you know it's cool, and then you do your transfers. So as long as you're doing all of your work in front of a flow hood or in a still air box, after you've heated it, you know that you can continue to take transfers because every part of your petri dish is clean. You know there's just clean mycelium there, you know the agar is clean, and you know your tools are clean. So here I have a clone of a mushroom. You can see in the plastic bag there, that is the fruit of the mushroom. And I just place a small amount of that and put it directly on the dish. And just like that, it is growing. So any part of a mushroom can be used to grow. See here, these white that's growing. So here I picked it, I've placed bacteria that was present on the fruit as well. But that's okay because we can take the clean parts of it and just move it to another dish. And eventually the whole thing will be clean. So whether I'm using an induction sterilizer or a torch of some kind, I want to keep those instruments red hot. And I can use a scalpel, use a dental pick, I can even use a knife. But the larger the knife is, the more fuel it takes to heat, especially to get it red hot. So we like to ensure that it's hot, and we also like to ensure that we spray our surfaces down with alcohol. Now, isopropyl alcohol is a lot more expensive here in Uganda than it is in the States. It's about $20 a liter. What does that come out to? Something like 40,000, 80,000 shillings. 80,000 shillings a liter? Yeah. So it's very expensive, but if it allows you to grow more mushrooms, especially more than 80,000 shillings worth of mushrooms, then it becomes worth it. But it's very precious material, and you need to understand how it works. So you spray it, and as it evaporates off of a surface, it draws moisture out of the organisms we're trying to kill. And so when you spray a surface, it's not clean. It has to evaporate off of that surface for the cleaning to take place. But it's not sterile like things you get out of a pressure cooker. So anytime we touch something, we're doing work in the lab, we don't want to talk, we don't want to cough. If I touch my hair, my hand is dirty now. If I touch a surface that's not clean, it's dirty. So I like to spray with alcohol the moment that happens, okay? So if I'm doing petri dish work and then, I drop something and I touch the table, I want to make sure that I hit it with alcohol once again. And then of course, before you start lab work, you wash your hands with soap and warm water, all of that. So here you can see I'm just taking mycelium out of a cup. And remember the petri dish, it has food coloring in it, okay? So that's what that color is. And so I just take any part of a cup, I add it to another cup, and it will start to grow from itself. So how do we know that the air filter that we're using is actually clean? Because if the air filter doesn't work, all of our petri dishes are going to contaminate, and we're going to think it's our fault. What we do is we run an empty petri dish across the air filter. An air filter is blowing clean air at you. There's not a single piece of dust. So if we open up the petri dish and we run it across the air filter, there should be nothing that grows there. You can close it again. You can wait 2 weeks. Nothing will grow. If there's a hole in that air filter, let's say you accidentally cut it with a knife and there's a piece of the air filter you're suspicious about. You take the petri dish, you run it there. If you start to see contamination, green mold like this, you know that part that accidentally got cut is compromised. Some people can actually tape that part up, test it again, and it doesn't come back contaminated like this. So these are green mold spores. Contamination can present itself as anything that is growing that we don't want to be growing, okay? So mycelium of multiple different species can be any color, so we need to understand what color of the mycelium we're working with. Mainly, most mushrooms are white though, and so we use that as our indicator. Here we have reishi. which turns yellow with age, and only certain species of reishi do it to this level. And then on the left here are kernels of rice that the mushroom was growing on that I just placed directly on the Petri dish. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So here you can see I'm taking transfers from a Petri dish and I'm just adding it to other dishes, and it will continue to grow out from there. So once we have a Petri dish that's ready to go, now we start the second stage of mushroom cultivation. So we go Petri dish or mycelium. Maybe you started on cardboard initially. Then you take your mycelium, the roots of the mushroom, and you add it to cooked grain, whether that's millet, whether that's sorghum, whether that's rice, okay? So we boil millet, we boil sorghum, and we infuse it with water, because mushrooms love water. Now here we've got some beer bottles that have cooked millet in it, okay? We like to pressure cook it, but all we're doing is we're just adding the mycelium directly to the bottle. Okay, it's that simple because the mushroom grows from itself outwards. So here, I've started a Petri dish by scraping the spores I was talking about earlier. When you take an oyster mushroom and you place it on a flat surface, the spores, that white powder, will accumulate, okay? If you can see it, it means that there's millions of them there. So when I scrape it onto a Petri dish, some oyster mycelium will grow and some contamination will grow, okay? So here we have clean mycelium, here we have contamination, and what we want to do is we want to just take a cut of that and move it to another dish. And maybe it still looks a little contaminated, so we take it again and we move it to another dish. Eventually, we clean up the cultures over time. So anytime we cut clean cultures away from a dish, and we put it on a dish so that it's nice and clean afterwards, we call that sectoring the mycelium. So we're sectoring away from the contamination. So once we have enough mycelium on a dish, now we can spread it out to our grain, okay? We're forcing the mushroom to grow on grain so that we can break it up again and spread it to our gardens eventually. So here we have a bunch of bags filled with millet. You can use bottles, you can use all sorts of materials, but you want to ensure that the grain that you use is cooked very well. That's why we like to use a pressure cooker. However, Josephine has had success simply steaming the millet in the barrels for many hours and adding a very small amount of lime to the bottles. So here I have disposable cups, which I like to use to shoot my agar into my grain bags, okay? But the reusable ones that we use here, we take it out with a scalpel or a dental pick, and then we throw it into our bottles, or we throw it into our bags. So here we've got an example of clean mycelium. This is all you need to start a whole nother Petri dish, okay? And then you just take that little bit of mycelium and you add it to your bottles of grain. And the whole bottle will start to turn white with mushrooms. So here we've got different examples of how you can cut your Petri dishes. So if you don't have Petri dishes, then all you're left with is cardboard spawn. You place your mushrooms on top of cardboard, the spores germinate, you keep the cardboard wet, and then the mycelium grows across the cardboard in the same way that it does a Petri dish, but it's much slower, okay? The reason this works is because cardboard allows for oysters to grow, but it doesn't really allow green mold to grow easily. But the trade-off is that it takes much longer. So this is how initially Josephine started. They had the cardboard and they would add the cardboard to the bottles directly, okay? Then those bottles would turn white. Then you break up the grain. Then you add it to your mushroom gardens. So here we've got multiple examples of bottles that are used for that purpose. And here we are at the Mushroom Training Center in person. What a trip. So we like to make sure that our packets of spawn, our bottles, when we break it up, that it's clean. So we like to do it inside of jars so that we can shake it into its individual kernels. Or if you have to do it with your hands, you ensure that your hands are really clean. So to increase your chances of success, you use an air filter, okay? But it's not required because once the mycelium is a full block, it has an immune system. It can protect itself from contamination. If you open a Petri dish, contamination happens immediately in the open air. But with a block of mycelium, it has more protection. So you can use your hands to break it up outside. So then we get to the third stage of cultivation, which is actually breaking up the grain into its individual kernels and spreading it across our gardens. Remember, a mushroom can be broken up into a million pieces and it will reconstitute itself back together again. It will grow into itself. Unlike plants, where if you cut it up, it will just die. So we can use multiple different food sources. We can use waste product from agricultural, we use agricultural waste. So we eat our soybeans, but we have hulls left over. We make coffee, but we have husk left over, right? We chew on sugarcane, but there's still that material left over. All of that can be used to grow mushrooms, okay? So we like to soak our materials, infuse it with water, and here in this case, we remove any sharp, pointy objects that could poke our bags that we're gonna later load, right? Because if it's really sharp, then it can poke our bag, and if there's an opening in the bag, that will bring in contamination at a later point. So it's very tedious to prepare your substrate, but it's worth it because in the end, you want your material to be clean. So depending on what you're using, you have to prep it, you have to chop it up, you have to soak it, right? So here we chop up all of our material. We like to get it as small as possible. The higher the surface area, the smaller it is, the quicker that the mushroom can break it down and use it as food, okay? So we take our material, we soak it, and then we mix it all up. Right now, it doesn't need to be clean because we're just preparing it to be cooked for a very long time, whether that's in a pressure cooker or here at Eco-Agric, they do it in barrels, okay? So they like to soak it, infuse it with water, then drain it off, and then you prepare your substrate and into your bags or your bottles, whatever it may be, and then you cook it at steam over a barrel all day, okay? So if you're using a pressure cooker at 15 pounds per square inch, you only need to cook it for 2.5 hours. But if you're doing it at atmospheric pressure, 0 psi, then you steam it all day, 12 hours, 15 hours, right? And so whatever material we're using, we soak it, and then we drain it, and then we cook it, okay? So now it needs to be cooked, right? So we load it into our barrels, and it takes time for this even develop with the fire there. So we have to take that into account. But once the steam starts getting going, then we can set our timer. Just like the pressure cooker, when we're at pressure, then we set the timer for our cooks. Here, we've sterilized, okay? So the myceliated grain, when we take a petri dish, we add it to cooked millet. All that millet turns white. We call that spawn. That's kind of our starting material for our gardens, okay? That way you don't have to always make petri dishes and then make your own spawn. Ideally, when you're first starting out, you source your spawn, like eventually it'll be from here, and then you can just bring it home and make your gardens. So we cook it all day, and then we allow it to cool, because if we add our mycelium to hot substrate, it will die off. But once it's cool, you want to start that process of getting the mushrooms onto the food, because you're always fighting contamination. As dust lands on your cooked substrate, the dust and the mold also wants to grow where the oysters want to grow, okay? So that's why we cook it in the first place. So we break up all of our bottles, we break up all of our packets of spawn, and we spread it to our And we like to make sure that a lot of people like to make their gardens in front of them. Do it here. And you can use any container to hold that mycelium, okay? As long as the container is nice and clean, you can add your grain and your substrate and pack it together, and the whole thing will turn white. It'll turn into a mushroom garden. So whether it's a clay pot or here we have buckets, and you can see this is the mycelium starting to grow out. Eventually the whole thing will turn white like this one, and then it will grow from the holes there. So as long as the mycelium is covered, that's why we like to completely surround our gardens with plastic. Here the top is exposed, and the mushrooms are not going to grow readily from that exposed top because the air moves across it and it becomes dry. But here there's a small hole where the mushrooms can emerge from because the moisture is being trapped inside of that container. So this allows us, when we pack all of our grain together with our substrate, it allows us to grow mushrooms in any container that we can find, okay? Whether that's a cardboard box or a plastic bottle or a bucket, or these black garbage bags, which originally inspired me to help Josephine here at Eco-Agric. When I saw it was being done like this, I knew that it was possible to grow mushrooms as long as you are determined enough and you are passionate enough about growing mushrooms. So you have to accept that there's going to be failure, but there's the photo that I saw. And then I realized, oh, people are growing mushrooms here in Uganda, and it's possible. And you don't need a pressure cooker. You don't need an air filter. You don't need all of this fancy equipment. You don't need electricity. You just need the ability to cook your substrate, which we do in barrels here. And then you need to be able to make your own spawn or source it from somewhere. Spawn being the white grain that's fully grown with mushrooms. You can break that up and then add it to your gardens. So how am I doing on time? I have 10 minutes, wonderful. So I'll go ahead and open up the room for questions and the Zoom meeting for questions. In the very beginning, the second stage, garden itself. Okay, so farms like to outsource the first two, make clean spawn. So they get the spawn and then they just break it up. But I know how to make the gardens. I know how to soak coffee. I know how to drain it. I know how to cook it in a barrel, and now I'm ready. Now I have whatever materials I can find. I get the spawn and then I mix it up and I add it to the gardens. So that's generally how mushroom farms start. Or if you're really doing a lot at scale, you just need to outsource that work to somebody else. If you're doing all three stages, it's going to be very labor intensive. So it's always important that you delegate those tasks to other farms, to other people. If you're one mushroom farmer and you're doing all three steps, you're going to hit a limit at some point because it takes time to do petri dish work. It takes time to make your grain. But if you can outsource and you can decentralize, you can delegate to other people, then you can make a tremendous amount of gardens using just drums. So, yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, right. So with cardboard, Aitza asked about the cardboard tech that Josephine uses, how to mitigate contamination there. So with cardboard, it's a bit of a trade-off. You're taking your mushroom, you're placing it on your cardboard, and you're waiting for the spores to fall on the cardboard. You're wetting that cardboard, it's a process, okay? And it doesn't always work. You know it's working when the cardboard starts to turn white. And you can use that cardboard to soak other cardboard. And then it also like a petri dish, but it takes a long time. The spores need to germinate and the mycelium has to run across a low nutrition food source such as cardboard. So that's why we like to skip that step now and make our sugar jelly, our agar, because instead of waiting a month or two for the spores to germinate and then for it to slowly turn white on the cardboard, we put it directly on a petri dish or on the sugar jelly, and within a week, the whole thing will be white. And then we can take that material and add it to our grain. Or we can make liquid culture from that, which we haven't really discussed here, but we're not doing that at Eco-Agric at scale yet. So.
Yeah, we did like we did layer, coffee grounds, cardboard,
Oh, into cardboard? Yes.
True.
Right. So Aixa is talking about how you can take myceliated grain and put that on wet cardboard and then roll that up, and then that material will turn white also. And you can add coffee grounds as a source of food, but you're already starting with the material that we're trying to make in the first place using the cardboard. So when Josephine first started, it was cardboard turning white, and then you tore that cardboard off and put it into the bottles of millet directly. Now that takes a really long time, but this is how it all began. So then once your bottle turns fully white, then you can break it up and use that as your starting material. So cardboard is not an ideal food source, and that is why it works to germinate spores on, because if it was a really good food source, the cardboard would turn green. It would be green mold everywhere, but it doesn't. That's why the oysters grow so slowly, because it has such little nutrition on it. So it's not an ideal way to grow mushrooms. It is the way that you do it when you absolutely are focused and determined on making grain spawn yourself work without having any air filters or pressure cookers or anything like that. But ideally, we want to start correctly. We want to make that sugar jelly. We want to make that agar, because the second we can tear a mushroom and put it right on there, and a week later, the whole thing will be white, or 2 weeks later, the whole thing will be white. Because any part of a mushroom can be used to grow more mushrooms, okay? Using agar, using sugar jelly. So, any other questions so far? Yes. How do you make the tissue culture? Okay, so great question. A tissue culture is just tearing a piece of a mushroom off and placing it on a petri dish. Now, the outer parts of a mushroom are the most dirty. So the best way to create a tissue culture is to, and when somebody says tissue culture, it just means that you tore a piece of the mushroom off and put it on your petri dish, okay? That's all that means. Ideally, you open up the mushroom so that the most central part of the mushroom is the most clean. The outer part has dirt and dust and things landing on it, whatever it may be. But when you tear a mushroom open, the very center flesh that's on the inside, like if this is an oyster mushroom, tear it open like that. This material here is the clean material. I then take my scalpel and I cut that material and place that on a petri dish. However, if I take a petri dish, or I take a oyster mushroom itself and I just tear this piece off and I place it on the dish, it will also grow. Now there may be some contamination with it, and then we'll sector away the clean mycelium like we discussed earlier. But it really is that simple. If the mushrooms have a food source to grow on and it's clean, it will expand outward from that. So the mushroom fruits are the mycelium, and the mycelium becomes the fruits, okay? So it can interchange back and forth like that. And any part of the mushroom can be used to grow more mushrooms. So I have a bottle of petri dish. Now I have more petri dishes. I put that on a petri dish. Now I have more petri dishes. We use the petri dish to see if a single spore lands on it that's not oyster. You'll see it. It'll turn green, or a piece of bacteria. It will start to turn brown or yellow. It'll look slimy. So you'll be able to see if anything has contaminated that dish. But ideally, the white mushroom, it just spreads out and then it becomes clean. And you see that it is clean from the start as it's growing. So that's why we like to use that technology. especially in the beginning stages of mushroom growth. But if you look at a bottle and it's totally white, and you break it up and you smell it, and it smells like clean mushrooms, then you know that's clean too. But you always visually inspect whatever part you're going to use and expand it out. Okay? So you take a bottle of millet, you break it up, you can make 10 more bottles of millet. That's grain to grain transfer, right? Because any part of a mushroom can be used to grow more mushrooms. Any other questions so far? Yes. Yes. Yes, yes. You were asking, can this process be done with any mushroom? Yes, exactly. So because we're talking about oysters, but yes, if you find a really hard mushroom that can't be eaten, that's medicinal, that can only be boiled, you cut the very white outer edge of that and you place that on a petri dish. If you find a local mushroom here that is gathered and eaten traditionally, you can open up the stem or the gill of that mushroom and try to grow that on a petri dish as well. This is how scientists discover new species of mushrooms and how they are introduced to the world. For example, I have a Kenyan reishi here that was brought by my friend George. I'm going to open up the center of that mushroom and I'm going to try and take as many cuts as I can onto petri dishes that I've made. And I'm going to wait and see if it turns white and if it grows from the pieces that I placed on it. And when it does, then I take that clean white mycelium, I set to another dish. Now the whole thing is white. Now I've preserved that culture from the wild. And remember, one petri dish can be used to grow tens of thousands of kilos of mushrooms, okay? Because such a small piece is needed to make more petri dishes, so it works exponentially. One petri dish is used to make 50. Now I have 50. Each one of those are used to make 50. You can imagine it like that. But you cannot spread it forever, okay? So you like to keep the number of transfers that you do as low as possible because the vigor of the genetics has to do with how far it has spread, okay? So in the same way that we age with time and we become old and wrinkled and all of that, that is because our cells are dividing over and over again, and it can only do that so many times. It's the same with mushrooms, and that process is called senescence. So as mushroom cultures get spread, you do a transfer, then you do a transfer, then you do a transfer. The more transfers that you do, eventually your garden yields will become lower and lower. So you always go back to an earlier culture that you have preserved, or you start from spore again. Starting from spore, placing the mushroom down, letting the mushrooms fall onto a surface, scraping those onto a dish, and starting a new culture. That is how we
Oh, we lost it there. I think it's on mute in the room.
Any more questions so far?
There we go.
I hope that made sense.
Daddy.
As simple as possible. This is from last week. Bear with me.
That's what I want to say.
Any other questions?
We have the question, but
Yeah.
there is this, we have our local Casmon mushroom here.
Yes.
That always grows seasonal.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, Termatomyces microcarpus. Yes. So that mushroom can be cloned, and the process for growing it may be different. Okay. oyster mushrooms are incredible because they can grow on so many different food sources. Sugarcane, coffee husk. Now other mushrooms can too, but what we want to do when we grow that one is figure out, can we grow it using like local soils or something like that, right? So we need to do a little bit of research on that mushroom, but what we'll do is we'll make a petri dish of it, it'll turn white, right? Then we add it to grain. Most mushrooms will grow on grain, okay? So that is a nice miracle that allows us to spread out, and because these mushrooms, they don't naturally grow on millet or sorghum in the wild, but they happen to do it when we force them to, and that is a miracle because it doesn't need to happen, but it does, and it allows us to grow more mushrooms. So once we have a bottle of white termitomyces, whatever that mushroom is, and the bottle of grain is fully white, now we need to experiment with our different food sources. Maybe it is sawdust, maybe it is coffee bean husk or something, but you can also use animal manures to grow mushrooms as well, or compost that has been sitting for many months and has broken down into a dark, rich soil, okay? And so that's how button mushrooms are grown around the world. A compost is generated, and then that spawn, the grain spawn, is broken up and added to that. So we'll have to figure out what food source it grows on, and that will require experimentation. But as far as getting the culture of that mushroom, yes. Any mushroom that you find, you can culture it out, put it on a petri dish. You see that it turns white, and that it's only white, there's no contamination. Now you can begin your other steps. You add it to your cooked grain, you wait for all of that grain to turn white, and now the experimentation begins, okay? Can I grow it on steamed cow manure? Can I grow it on coffee bean husk or sugarcane husk or sawdust? And then you see, well, okay, maybe the sawdust does turn fully white, but then I put it in the fruiting room and it never grows. Okay, well, maybe that's because you needed to bury it outside in the ground, like the way that you found it. So you have to experiment with different methods when it comes to new species. And that's what's so incredible about mushrooms, is that we are with mushrooms where plants were over 100 years ago. Over 100 years ago, people would go out into the woods and they start naming this plant, and this is going to be the name of this. Now we know a lot of plants. But mushrooms are basically where we were 100, 150 years ago. There's so many species to be discovered in Uganda alone. New types of reishi, new types of turkey tail, all sorts of medicinal mushrooms we don't even know the compounds that are in there. Those are the future medicines of pharmacology. There's a mushroom in Uganda that is waiting to be discovered that has medicinal compounds in it that we do not know about. So we have to go and find those mushrooms and clone them, and then start to begin the scientific research on those mushrooms. But yes, that mushroom can be grown, and I bet somebody's already cultured it and figured something out. So we go onto the internet, we go onto Google, and we try to find, has anybody cultivated this mushroom before? And we always look it up using the Latin name, the Termitomyces, whatever it was, right? So we use that because universally, whatever the language people are speaking, like if they did this research in China already, they're still going to use that Latin name of the mushroom. So we can use that to figure out, has anybody done this before? Can we read it on online forums? Can we find it on Google Scholar using scientific journals, whatever it may be? Sci-Hub, you can access all sorts of scientific journals for free using that website. So, yeah, it's very exciting. Yes.
All right. Hey, Ted.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. We do have Eric online, rolling into the next thing. So maybe we take a last question, or maybe they can catch you since you're there in person for any follow-up questions.
I got you. Yeah, we've got one more. We can wrap it up. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yes.